are they welcoming that type of art participation, that community level participation, and how does Elevate fit into that, and maybe a little bit about sort of the origins of Elevate, and if that has been affected by some of the trends and issues that we see in the arts sector?
So I think the idea of arts moving outside, right, outside of auditoriums, outside of galleries, is a national trend, right? Where it's a response. Here I go with my business hat. It's a response to the fact that audiences are dwindling, right? And so arts organizations are having to go out and go to where the audience is. That's why Flux is so fantastic, because you get to see the types of performances that previously you would only see indoors after you've bought a ticket, if you after you've made the time in your schedule to dress up and do all this. And now you can just, if you live in Castleberry, walk outside and you see it in your neighborhood. And so it's created this really wonderful access point for the arts that didn't exist before. And so that's a national trend. Elevate started out as, like you say, Kyle, it was a whole separate idea from what it has evolved into now. The idea initially was, to experiment with this idea of having art outdoors. What it has turned into is more of a community and a social engagement. And I think the first interaction with AD&A was the first time that happened. And now Elevate is really looking at how can the arts impact downtown? How can the arts impact the artists? And to the point that Kyle just made, how can we do that without competing with what's already being done? I mean, there are already so many great arts organizations that are doing fantastic work. And so I think this year's Elevate, more than any other year, there were partnerships with Goat Farm to produce the projects. There are partnerships with Fringe Festival, which is going on tomorrow night, if anybody wants to go out and check it out. And so really pulling back from being a producer and responsible for creation and playing more the role of a supporter and building an environment where the arts can flourish and can interact with that audience in a way that is kind of the new public art paradigm.
I think what's been helpful too, as opposed to the earlier festivals we did where you put out your 10 by 10 tent and somebody comes in from wherever they come from and they put up the same art they've been selling at all their other festivals around the city or the region, whatever else. Or even the institution-based arts that we have downtown with the Rialto Theater or Theatrical Outfit or MODA and other sort of museums we have downtown, the corporate art galleries, is that those to a certain extent aren't place-based. I can take that piece of art and put it somewhere else. I can do that performance in another theater, and it's the same show. Where with what's happened with Elevate and lots of other newer sort of arts things that are going on, as Priscilla walks into the room, is that it's very much dealing and engaging with the physical location that's there. Whether it's the murals that are going up or the dance pieces or the light installations, the artists are having to respond to what's happening in the community, in the neighborhood, with the buildings, with the characters that are walking by on the street, whatever it happens to be. And there's a lot more engagement and participation that way. I think it's been really successful that way because it's not, that's the same artist doing the exact same thing all around town or from one region to the next or from one year to the next. That even the groups that are performing again this year, they've got a different thing that they're doing based upon where they've chosen to operate. The other thing that's sort of been crucial as well is that at first it was outsiders coming in. We have issues downtown with everybody commuting in for work or commuting in for a football game, whatever it happens to be. And at first the arts was sort of seen the same way, that it was somebody who was brought in to do something here and then they go back to their organization or their home or their business somewhere else. And now through sort of the seeds that were planted by Elevate and the exposure that it sort of created in the downtown sphere, we have home-based or downtown-based organizations that are operating here and can speak the language, and it's not that same us versus them. We haven't had the sort of political wrangles that some other public art installations or performances have had, because there's been sort of that embracing of we have those conversations, we see them as our own, that we are part of that sort of arts creation, rather than somebody who's coming in to fix us, do a project, collect some fees, and go back to wherever they came from.
Cool.
The fact that public art is now starting to take place in a much more, public space, that art, institutionalized art is now taking place in the public space is a testament to hip-hop culture and the effect that hip-hop culture has had on the world. And to support that claim, I'm going to use the element of graffiti. So let's rewind back to early 70s, South Bronx, Philadelphia. You have disenfranchised youth who are painting on trains. These youth would never have the opportunity to be in an art gallery. So they take their art and start painting on trains. So that's really one of the first steps to, art being seen as street art. It's because you have Cornbread in Philadelphia. You have Dobby White in New York, and they're making these masterpieces on trains, but they travel. So it's going from the Bronx to Manhattan, to Brooklyn. And that's a powerful statement, So you fast forward to today, and you have Cause, who recently had an exhibition in the Holland Museum. He's a street artist, You have Banksy, and everyone knows who he is, So I think that's a huge testament to the power of hip-hop culture. Just the fact that now we look at art and say art has to be eye level. In the past, art was one of these things that was very highbrow. Right. Nowadays, hip-hop has brought it to an eye level. And I think that's what's so great about hip-hop is that it's allowed the patrons and the people who practice this to actually have an arts education. Because with the four elements, you have dance, you have spoken word, you have physical and visual art, and also you have performing arts as well. So it's a testament.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. I saw a performance a couple of years ago. Speaking of hip hop, right? So hip hop dance, Lil Buck the Legend did a performance with Yo Yo Ma, right? And it was amazing. And it was an audience that you would never think would be interested in seeing, essentially a break dancer, street dancer perform. And the way he performed and integrated what he did with this very classical presentation was amazing. And so I think you're right. I think that all forms of art now are considering these unexpected places and these unexpected experiences. And so, Elevate, Dashboard, Flux, Living Walls, it's all about considering various levels of access to the arts, right? And so there's a whole lot of trepidation around the traditional art forms, right? About the fact that audiences are dwindling. And so what does this mean? Does this mean that classical music is going away and nobody wants to see a ballet anymore? And it's scary that transition that you're talking about. But I think there's room for everything. It's like both and. And I think where we are at our best and where we're smartest and where we're going to create the best opportunities is when we can bring those two together. And anecdotal, at the Elevate Block Party last week, for whoever was there, it was the most interesting experience I've ever had to see 60-year-old women dancing to Bobby Shawarma. I was like, whoa, for whoever knows what I'm talking about. But it's bringing all those things together, and it's a really interesting time in the arts and for the city at the same time. Yeah.
So I want to shift a little bit because there's a lot of really good nuggets I think we can come back to within these conversations. And yes, I love all of it. But I want to give Gregory a chance to talk a little bit about his work and role at the ARC and specifically, and again, feel free to talk about other issues, but I wanted to kind of focus on, because you do have that kind of 10-county, you're looking after the 10 counties, in terms of
depends on the issue. Sometimes
yeah,
22 counties.
Right. But I've seen a lot, come through my inbox of discussions and talks about, and forgive me if the terminology isn't right, but aging communities and the arts. And can you tell us a little bit more about that work that the ARC is taking on?
Sure. There are a couple things that keep me up at night, and that is certainly one of them. Arts and aging, I think, is something we don't particularly do well. Coming from traditionally my perspective in the arts community, we talk a lot about children are the future, and someday Somebody will come after me for this, but I'll say, I'm starting to feel like children are not the future, but that old people are the future. For the first time in human history, there are as many 5-year-olds as 65-year-olds. What we think of as the human pyramid, where people are born and then they start dying and there's fewer people at the top than at the bottom, that's not what the world looks like anymore. It's becoming a human rectangle. Families are having fewer children, and those people are living longer. A lot of studies are showing female Caucasian born today, life expectancy of 100.
Wow.
And I don't think we're planning for that in the arts. And I think a lot about that. That we talk about like people checking out, really we program for people to check out 65, 70. When it's dark out, that's when shows are still going on. That's not the majority of the population. If you think of people 65 to 85, 90 now, still participating in the arts. But if a concert, if a whatever doesn't event doesn't end until 10:30, they can't drive home. There's a lot of people who can't drive home in the dark. We have a terrible, I don't think this is news, public transportation system, and so you can't get back to your home. You are writing off everybody basically 65 and older. We're pushing people out from attending our events in the arts because we're not paying attention to the demographic shifts of the world is aging, and we are not really thinking about those people. Those people are going to be in the workforce longer because if you are going to live to be, I'm going to live to be, God forbid, 95, 100, I'm not going to retire at 65 because I have been saving in a terrible, terrible way. Right? And so, but in the arts, we talk about like cultivating donors that are older donors that are going to give these giant bequests,
Right.
because they're going to, we have these expectations that they will die at 70 with this big pot of money that they will give us. But they have 30 years of retirement now, and they're paying for their homes, they're paying for their health care. It's just not, it's not how the world functions now, and we're not well prepared for it. We also talk about it as an opportunity. In a lot of other cities, people are thinking of this in a progressive way. If you think of Boise, Idaho, where in a hospital they are building a dance company in residence.
Is that John McIntyre?
John McIntyre, Trey McIntyre.
Trey McIntyre, I'm sorry.
Trey McIntyre, that's right. Trey McIntyre project. Because all the studies are showing that people in healthcare situations interacting with artists, and we're not talking about like getting people in hospitals to paint. We're talking about those types of human interactions that artists really excel at, reduce hospital stays. And there are solutions that the arts community brings to the table in the healthcare community that we're not really, the healthcare communities hasn't been thinking of. Our region, I worry about it, our region's not really thinking about this in a progressive way, and we should be a capital in this. I mean, Atlanta is the healthcare capital of the world, we're the home of the CDC, this is something we should be out in front of, and we haven't really done a great job of that yet.
No, sure. We can open up now if there's any more comments. But I think we're a small enough group here today that we can be intimate and have a conversation that's back and forth. So I think we all agreed from the beginning we don't want to be talking heads up here. So feel free to ask questions, and we can kind of take conversations and keep feeding each other.
We should start a talking heads cover band.
So this aging population thing was working in other cities. How did they get it going?
Other cities express an interest. I think of CORE, the dance company in Decatur. They have a project working with seniors housing. They get flown to Arkansas to do that. They cannot get an audience to do that work in Atlanta.
They get an audience to do that?
Like they can't find a community that supports that.
Yeah. So do you think it may be several different issues, sounds like, but and when you talk about new program creation, there's always that, well, who's going to fund it?
Yeah.
Like, is that
Sure.
is that an issue that you see? Is that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're 50th, right? We're 50th in the country for arts funding per capita. If you added Guam and Puerto Rico, we'd be too farther down the list.
Right.
And so if you talk about innovative new programming, there's no money for that.
Yeah.
But like you said, Greg, sometimes it's just paying attention. So, we had this conversation after I heard those numbers and heard about the Arts and Aging Conference. And so I went back to the office and I said, hey, we have an art center at Chastain. And incidentally, most of the students